Welcome to Fruit Snacks, a weekday podcast that covers big ideas about the Christian worldview in a bite-sized format. Hey everyone, today we're looking at another attribute of God, and it is His justice. What does it mean to talk about the justice of God or to say that God is just? Well, if we look at the way that this word or these words in the Hebrew and the Greek get used, we can give ourselves a little bit better of an understanding of how it's intended and the different senses in which it is used in the Bible. First of all, there is a legal sense in which we would talk about justice or being just, in the sense of judging something or rendering a judgment. A just judge is one who judges well or rightly or fairly. There's also a moral sense in which we can talk about justice, which has more to do, not so much legally, but just in general with making and rendering right, and I mean morally right and ethically right decisions about things. And so to be just in our decision making, or for God to be just, means that God makes the right call, morally speaking, about things. And there's also this sense about justice being associated with equity and fairness in decisions and plans. Now, that's not necessarily something that we would think of as much, but it plays into a, I think, wrong way in which people construe justice and God being just in our culture today, which we'll get to in just a minute. So in the Old Testament, there's a sense in which justice and the justice of God has to do with ensuring that wickedness is rightly punished, and that whatever compensation is made for wickedness that has been done to someone is fair, that the punishment, as much as it can, sort of matches the crime. Now, that does not mean that every compensation that we would look at from an Old Testament perspective with our modern lens would be necessarily what we would construe of as fair. But within the context of the culture, especially if you compare the law and the compensation for wrongdoing in the Old Testament, Levitical law and Deuteronomy, compared to that of other ancient cultures like Hammurabi's Code, for instance, what you find is that the Old Testament law was by far the most progressive kind of legal law code and legislation as it pertains to the treatment of women, of slaves, of children, and generally people who didn't have very many, if any, rights in ancient culture. Doesn't mean that it's okay, but what it does mean is that the Bible, even then, would have been very progressive for its day. And another aspect of this idea of justice in the Old Testament, or God being just, is that God doesn't show any kind of partiality. God doesn't let anything slide. And that's an important concept. We see this in Job. It's a big theme there. We see it in other places as well. Now, into the New Testament, it takes a little bit of a turn. A lot of those ideas and concepts still apply, but we also see this idea of God's justice and being just associated with God being righteous, that God is and will be ultimately vindicated in dealing rightly with all people equally. God doesn't play favorites. And if God did, He wouldn't be just. So His justice has everything to do with Him being equitable and fair across the board, not a respecter of persons or treating people differently somehow than He would others. What this means is that as a doctrine, the justice of God and God being just means that wickedness and sin, rebellion, disobedience, it must be punished. It has to be. God is not simply free to wave it off. If He did, He would not be just. and therefore he would not be good. I don't think any of us would want, when we think about all the wickedness and the evil that has been done to people throughout history, I don't think we want to consider any of those things being somehow swept under the rug or forgotten about or not paid back in some way. We have a very strong, I think, innate and God-given desire to see people who have been wronged vindicated, to see those who have wronged others to be punished, to get what they deserve. And the doctrine of the justice of God is exactly about that those who have done wrong, not only against their fellow man, but against God, will get what they deserve. Now, we're going to talk later this week about where the concepts of God's grace and mercy fit into this equation. But it's extremely important for us to nail down that God's justice demands that payment must be made, consequences must be had, punishment must be meted out for sin and rebellion. If God doesn't punish sin, he's not good.